we are into the final 8 here, and anyone can still win this game. I actually think at this point everyone has an argument. If for whatever reason we did a final 8, which we would never do, but everyone could have an argument to win. Shane, it's going to be really hard to kind of see. Let's talk this down player by player. What are your thoughts on Danielle to this point, who I think is probably in the strongest position as of yet? What are your thoughts on Danielle and my comments there?
Yeah. So I think Danielle's in a good position. She has allies on all sides. And I think she's making moves. Is she always making the right move? That can be debated. But especially what we saw tonight, she kind of just threw names all over the place and everyone followed the lead and talked about those names. Nobody ever brought up her name though.
Right.
So that's a testament to the relationship she's made, and that's a really good sign to go deep in the game. It's just, oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry. No, I just think the issue is Danielle played a bit too fast and loose tonight, and now people are bringing up her name. So I totally agree with you, Shane. She has allies on all sides, and now the real test of whether she can win is whether she can kind of quiet the discussion around her name after this down. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that is going to be an interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. I mean, I think she's made some really strong moves to this point. I think her best move would be kind of to back off a little bit and let a couple other people make some moves, which she ended up doing tonight, but she did make a lot of noise about it first. But it did seem to me like eventually the plan was Olivia's plan, that she was the one who was kind of pushing, as in a couple different rooms they seemed to be between Josh and they were between Josh and Carl, like Shane, a couple different names coming up there, but Olivia was the one who was kind of set on Haley, and she had her own reasons for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The key will be and this won't become too relevant until later on in the game if Olivia were to make it to the final ascent, but will Olivia own that this vote was hers? Does she realize she was in control of this vote, or will she let someone else take the credit from her? And it might not be a bad idea to let people take the credit at this point because it makes you less of a threat. But when you get to the end, you better take the credit yourself and have the evidence to back it up.
Absolutely. I think Olivia is very underestimated at this point. Kevin, what are your thoughts on Olivia?
Oh, I absolutely agree with Shane. I think that is the thing that people often forget, because you can't just say at the end, I was the one behind this, even if you were the one behind it. I think one of the interesting things we saw today is that the names that we saw, Josh and Haley, in this vote were pitched by David and Haley going for Josh, Carl, and Mike going for Haley. But the vote came down to the 4 women, Danielle, Olivia, Mariana, and I would argue Bambi too, even though she voted wrong. So I think it's up to Olivia to see that she was in fact the deciding factor there and thrust it away if one of those other, in the group of 5 that I mentioned before, the women, are in the final 3 and say, that was my vote that changed this game. It's up to Olivia to say, that's not how it happened, and convince the jurors.
Yeah, great point. And I mean, you mentioned Mariana getting and Bambi kind of in the mix there. I mean, Team Kelly and versus Team Janet, I think, is completely out the window. These two ladies have definitely managed to find their way into the strategic decisions. They're getting lots of information from both sides. They're doing a great job of kind of manipulating that information as well. Shane, Mariana with the compass does seem to be in a really strong position. A lot of people are kind of protecting her, but at the same time, she's not really getting a lot of information. What are your thoughts of where Mariana stands at this point and what she kind of needs to do?
So I was thinking she was in a good spot before today, in a very good spot. But I think today her stock went down a bit because she has this compass that she hasn't told anyone about, but she also has all these social relationships that people valued, but now the numbers are dwindling. And all fingers are pointing at Mariana to have the compass, and people question, well, if I'm tight with her, why didn't she tell me? And that puts a target on her, and she loses social stock. So I don't know that at this point that was the best idea for her to keep it secret so long.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it, Kevin?
I think it is. I think the problem right now is Mariana has this compass, and I think whether or not she can win this game will determine what will be based on how she uses it. Does she use it to save herself when she needs it? Does she use it to save another ally who's going to take her to the end? And she'll argue that was a huge move.
Right.
My concern right now is that she's not going to have enough social capital and enough knowledge to use it in a way that's going to benefit her at the end of the game. I'm excited to see myself be wrong here, and I'm excited for Mariana to maybe potentially use this power as leverage.
Hmm.
But I think what I saw today is Mariana a bit more following than leading in conversations, which as we get down to the final 8 is a bit worrisome to get a case to argue at the end of the game.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and her relationship with Mike is a really interesting one because both of them at one point or another today were pushing each other's names on deaf ears, completely deaf ears. No one wanted to hear Mariana. No one wanted to hear Mike. The only people who said either one of their names were each other. Mike is kind of caught in the middle a little bit here for me. He's played a good game. He has a bit of a relationship with everyone. Shane, what are your thoughts on Mike and maybe his path to get to the end here?
Yeah, so Mike, I think, has, as you mentioned, he does have social capital with different groups. And one thing that I noticed tonight is that with 2 different groups, he told them, this is my final 3. This is what I want to, who I want to be at the end with. One being him, Carl, and Josh, who they've been together pretty much the whole game. Another was with Olivia and Bambi, and apparently they made a close bond on day zero.
Yeah.
But similar to things you mentioned in the past, like once people start talking and if people find out he's promised final 3 to 2 different groups, then they all point their fingers at him and he's done. So I do think, to answer your question, I do think he has a path to the end. It's a bit of a tightrope right now, though, and I think he needs to stand out a little bit with either a big move that's solely his that he could claim at the end, or some exemption wins, or he can use his half compass that he has to make something happen too.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him mention that he might make a play to try to get Josh to give him that other half compass, which would make it full and really give him an opportunity to make a splash. And with all that social capital, he has the opportunity to. Kevin, what are your thoughts to this point on Mike?
See, I'm a bit more optimistic than Shane. I actually think Mike is in a phenomenal position right now, and I think the reason for that is before this vote, he was really seen as double dealing, being on all sides. But after this vote, the 2 groups are kind of mad enough at each other that I don't think they're going for him immediately. And I also think that's something you can argue at the final ascent.
Right.
You put yourself in that position, which he totally did. I think the trick for him now is going to be making the decision: is it time to flip? Go to the other side. If I do that, am I going to be able to remain under the radar? Or do I just need to lay low for a couple of more votes? Because you gotta weigh, can I get to the end versus am I going to have a story, or are people going to think of me as a flipping trickster that they don't want to vote for? But I'm optimistic that Mike's going to be able to figure it out. I think he played this vote actually maybe the best of anyone? Question mark? I'm not sure about saying that, but I think he did.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely an argument for that. It seemed to me for a long time that he was in a trio with just Carl and Joshua, but yeah, it's that relationship day zero. He's managed to kind of keep that going along, and like you said, Kevin, I really don't think anyone's really pointing their finger at Mike, even though he's right in the middle of everything there. I want to talk a little bit about Joshua now. I mean, he's had kind of a, he's had a bit of a strong game at first, and then he had that big crossroads where I don't know how the players felt about it, but I know a lot of the mods were kind of a little bit like, what was going on there? But it seems like Josh and Carl have been kind of looped together. What do you think that means for Josh's game, and what do you think about his path going forward here?
So I think him being looped with Carl is not good because the pairs are being targeted, hence why one of the reasons why Haley went home today. So that doesn't look good for both of them. And one thing I heard was that because the vote tonight originally at one point was between Carl and Josh, and people were arguing to keep Carl because he says what he means, he's more transparent, and they said Josh is very sneaky and they have no idea what he's thinking. So I
Yeah.
think eyes are on Josh, so that could be tough for him.
Yeah, Kevin, what are your thoughts on Josh?
Totally agree with Shane. I
Mhm.
think Josh is in a very precarious position, mainly because of his own actions. He's been big, he's been showy, and as we dwindle in numbers, that becomes very obvious. I
Mhm.
think Josh is in a good position if his entire alliance at the moment stays true and sticks to him. But the problem is, A, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
B, once you get down to just the members of the alliance, even if it does happen, I think he's again in that tricky situation. I also am not sure he's handling the jury excellently. I'm not
No.
sure when players are going out that they're predisposed to want to listen to what Josh has to say at the final assent. And I think part of the problem is that our certified jury mayor, Philip, left on very bad terms with Josh. But I also think it's that Josh isn't seen as really going around and speaking the truth to people. He's hiding a lot of what he's saying, and again, I think that's intentional. I think it's a strategy. We've seen it work really well on Survivor before. The issue is, I think, when we get to this final ascent, the jury is there are enough people left in the game that if Josh is against another person currently in our cast, I'm not sure he's going to be able to get people to listen to him over them. But that's first he has to get there. That's thinking way in advance.
Yeah, I mean, I think, perhaps if it's more strategy, I mean, the way he handled the Philip Crossroads rubbed me the wrong way, if I'm being completely honest. And Philip's the first guy in the jury, but if that's possibly a strategy to get him into the final seat and he can properly convey that at Final Ascent, it could end up being a positive. So we're going to have to see and what his mindset was and, if that was just for fun or if he was thinking long term and maybe playing a little 3D chess on the players there. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays that if he is in a final ascent there. And then we've got his, at least as the other players are seeing it, his duo member Carl. So Carl's a staple within our community. He's played a bunch of our minis. He played a couple seasons in our pre-game prior to Expedition Online. And he has always been a character, Shane. And every time out that we have seen Carl, he has gotten better and better and better. And right now, he is definitely playing his best game yet, as he's got Josh, who is a bit of a shield for him, when Carl is usually the shield. And he's got a bit of a relationship with everyone. It's a little bit out there. I think the players are starting to figure that out. But what do you think about Carl, our guy Carl? How's he playing? What's he got to do to get to the end and get some votes?
Yeah, as you've mentioned, he's played a lot. I agree, this is his best game. I think every time he's played, he's taken some lesson from that and used it to improve next time. So if he gets to the end, he could say that, but I don't know how much the other players will take stock of that, but it is very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's sitting next to a first-time player, I don't know what they would think of that. But I do think his path to the end, there is a path. There's also a path to the jury because Carl's name does get thrown around quite a bit. He's an easy person to target. He's loud. He, on the surface, seems like he's good at challenges, could win some exemptions, which I do think he could. He was right in there today. So I think there's always reasons to get rid of Carl. There's also reasons to keep Carl. It's just, will the right people with the reasons to keep Carl be the ones that step up and save him?
Yeah, great point. Kevin, you've seen Carl play as much as I have. What are your thoughts?
I actually think Carl's playing quite well. He's loud, but he's speaking his mind, and people peg that for him today. I actually think that's what saved him, because people feel like, if he's the devil, at least if he's the devil, right?
Right.
And I think he knows that too. Like, Carl's coming into this with eyes wide open. He's playing the game that he knows he can play. Is it going to get him to the end? Now, that's another question. I again think it's a bit too flashy to get to the end with this cast, but I think he's playing a lot better than some players in this game think.
Yeah.
He shored up connections to keep him safe tonight, and I think will keep him safe for the next couple of nights. The question is he going to be able to blindside some of his allies that are not going to take him to the final three? Who knows? Who
Yeah,
knows?
no,
I think he maybe can, but we'll see.
I agree with that. But I think Carl has been very self-aware in this game, which has not always been his strength. And yeah, and he's anytime that his name has come up, I do believe it's come back to him. So he's really kind of built proper relationships with people where they are kind of watching his back. And his name, I don't think his name has been written down. I could be wrong. I'd have to go look at the votes, but having your name be brought up as much as Carl has and never being written down by anybody is also saying something as well. But it's going to come for Carl right now. He's seen as a wild card. He's seen as someone who, is, very different than anyone else in the cast. And some people are maybe underestimating what that can mean in a final three. And if Carl is able to, again, convey himself in the final ascent, and I think players are underestimating what Carl may be able to do in a final ascent, because Carl can be very passionate in that situation, because Carl loves these games and wants to win very badly, and that comes through in a final ascent, and people's heartstrings can be pulled. So I would love to see it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, to that point, Carl is probably hungrier and more motivated for the win than anyone on the cast, and that's not
Yeah.
saying that others aren't. I think a lot of people want to win, but that point means a lot when you're that hungry for it and you get to the end, you're going to pull out all the stops. So if he gets there, I think he's going to pull it all out and people aren't going to expect it, and he could be more likely to pick up some live votes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, I mean, kind of down in my unofficial power rankings as I've gone through these players, I was kind of naming them off in what I kind of thought was the power rankings a little bit. So the only reason I've dropped David down so far is the last crossroads really have not gone his way at all. Even though Katie goes out instead of him, I mean, he still takes a hit socially, I think, in that crossroads. And it just seems to be going downhill for David. But he has played such a strong game to this point. Shane, what has David got to do to turn things back around for him?
Yeah, it's tricky because I would liken his early game to a Hancian type of game, and it dropped a lot. I think he needs to have the right timing. So his stock dropped a lot. He needs to make it rise, but he doesn't want it to rise too high that people are going to be like, "Oh, he's the rat." I see it now, and I remember early on he played a really strong game. We've got to get him out before the finals. So he just has to be really precise with his moves.
Yeah, Kevin, where does he go from here? I mean, he's just been blindsided. His number one is gone. Only Bambi is left who voted with him. What are your thoughts on David?
That's an interesting question. One, I said after tonight's exemption challenge that David did need to win exemption. That's no longer the case. David needs to win exemption tomorrow. That's the most surefire way to ensure he has a future in the game. Number one. Number two, I think David has to be willing to basically offer his game up in the short term. I think he has to use social connections, tell people the truth, which is that if you let Josh, Mike, and Carl get further in this game, you're going to be the one that's sorry on the jury, at least in my opinion. I think he has to use the information he does truly have and try to rebuild some connections that he lost by being left out of this vote. I think he can do it. Do I think he's going to? I think winning exemption would really help him. But I think it's possible and it'll be fun to see. He definitely has the potential. We've seen him throughout the game use it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a tough hill to climb.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have kind of heard the gender alliances have kind of come up. I'm not a big fan of gender alliances, but they've been relevant in this game. The girls have mentioned it a few times. The guys have mentioned it a couple times. We had that one group where it was all guys, even though that didn't even last one crossroads. But girls are outnumbering guys right now, and yeah, I mean that might be David's best route in the short term to just say, hey guys, where's my vote going, just to get maybe through the next vote and cause a little bit more friction until someone else's name rises to that top, because as we all know, it doesn't take long before someone else takes over that spot. And finally, I mean, last but not least, I think we said at the beginning, all 8 of these cast members definitely have a chance to win this game. Everyone has a route. The only reason I have Bambi so late on my list here is because she seems to always be on the wrong side of the numbers. Now, her name never really seriously comes up, although tonight her name was being tossed around, but I think a lot of people were using it as a decoy and not really taking it seriously, as she did not get any votes. Shane, why has Bambi been so on the outside, and what does she need to do to have an argument at the final ascent, if she were to get there?
Yeah, so I think that she's been on the outside because she appears to be a floater. She appears to be just going with the flow, not making any huge decisions. So she's essentially expendable to people and they don't need her vote. Or as well, she does get left out of room sometimes, and when plans change so rapidly in this game, she's just not there to hear the final plan.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think what she needs to do to have a shot to get to the end and win is I think she needs to really solidify her alliance with Mike, because Mike thinks they have this day zero connection.
Yeah.
So she really needs to go to him, convince him that he's her number 1 ally in this game. And then I think she needs to take charge of a vote. And a smart way to do that would be to get the bottom dwellers, so the Davids, and then whoever is the target of that vote, and get Mike and his people and flip the script. And that's a start to help her get there.
Yeah, I mean, everyone seems to love Bambi, right? Right, Kevin?
Yeah, no, everybody does, but I think tonight showed in a lot of ways that Bambi's been left out of some pretty important information. I think she can make her way. I think she can make her way back in. The only issue is I do think she's an easy vote. People aren't sticking close to her like you need to be stuck close to if you want to get to final 6, 5, 4, etc. I think Bambi can make her way out of this. It's going to require more information than she has at the moment, but it also is going to require that big move. When you have nothing to lose, I mean, she said it tonight. She feels like every day her name is mentioned. I think she needs to start playing like her name's being mentioned every night. Make these big moves. Go to people. Say the truth. You're not gonna win at the end if you're against some of these people, and pitch herself the way that she seems to think of herself as someone who can't win. Because I think that's the way that she actually does win. Mm-hmm. Whether or not it happens, we'll see. But I think there's hope. She just has to put her foot on the gas pedal.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like tonight's vote should open her eyes. I mean, Mariana, the only 2 Team Kellys left not voting together. I mean, she's got to realize that, hey, Mariana has more information, at least more information. She's on the right side of the vote. I mean, I don't necessarily think that's true, but I think Bambi has just kind of ended up in the wrong rooms right before the crossroads in some situations as well. But it's definitely, she has a route. I mean, I think right now, I think a lot of players have her worked into their final 3, but not for the reason she wants them to be there. She needs, like Shane said, to make some sort of decisive move, maybe not go with the people who want to drag her there, but rather find some people who she can drag there. And, you know, depending on who takes control in the next couple, I mean, there's a couple options there. David's looking for someone to drag him a little bit. You know, Mike's looking to make moves and kind of solidify himself. They have that day zero, so it's going to be really interesting to see how things progress from here. Really sad to see Haley go. She really was in such a great spot there, and unfortunately things turned on that trio real quick. We were talking a couple episodes about how we thought they were in a really strong position within the Team Janets, but unfortunately the rest of the Team Janets figured that out, and things have mixed up real quick. Original party lines are completely gone. Gentlemen, I think we are going to put a wrap on day 10. It was an absolute blast. The strategy session was all over the map, and it has opened things up for the rest of the season. So for Kevin Baker and Shane Byrne, I was Jonathan Dykes. This was Expedition Online Glacier Bay Day 10. We will see you again for Day 11. Peace.